Welcome to Breaking Barriers, Women Building Business in York and North Yorkshire, produced by Enterprise Works and hosted by me, Andrea Morrison. Together, we're exploring the stories, challenges, and successes of women entrepreneurs across our region. This series is grounded in the new era for female entrepreneurship research, a collaboration between the University of York and the Federation of Small Businesses. The research uncovered critical insights about the everyday realities, hidden obstacles, and untapped potential of women building businesses in York and North Yorkshire. From city centres to countryside villages to our coastal towns, women in our region are shaping industries, challenging expectations, and building businesses that create economic value and jobs. But it could be better, with the research suggesting that if women in enterprise were supported, they could add 165,000 jobs and add £2.6 billion to GVA. Each episode will dive into a new theme. You can expect honest conversations with female founders, changemakers, and also allies, alongside practical tools and insights to help you navigate your own entrepreneurial journey. So whether you're just starting out, scaling up, or simply searching for some solidarity, I hope you enjoy the podcast and hear something new. In our very first episode, we're diving straight into one of the biggest challenges in our region for women in business: lack of confidence. Nearly a quarter of female entrepreneurs said it was a challenge that was faced by them. Many described feeling like an imposter or that previous toxic workplace experience hindered their ability to believe in themselves or their business. And this often led to them limiting their ambition, having an aversion to risk, or undercharging for their products or services. Today, we're going to explore some of those challenges, explore where they come from, and hopefully gain some insight as to how we can begin to overcome them. So to open this conversation, I'm joined by Professor Kiran Trehan, Vice-Chancellor for Partnerships Engagement at the University of York and the driving force behind this research. Welcome, Kiran, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here, Andrea.
Now, I obviously know the background to this research, having been involved in it with you, but for the benefit of our listeners, why is having this research so important for our region, and why was the timing so important?
So let me talk about, why here, why now, and 3 reasons why I care deeply and passionately in terms of why we needed to act. York and North Yorkshire are sitting on untapped gold. What do I mean by that? 165,000 jobs and 2.6 billion in growth potential, just waiting to be unlocked. So that's a really important and sharp reminder of the potential and the gaps. Secondly, you might think it's strange that in 2025 we are talking about women enterprise, women's businesses and the gaps. And yet, despite years of policy tweaks, female founders in 2025 were still shut out from finance, from markets, from managements. So the systems aren't shifting where it really mattered. And then thirdly, I think there is a collective belief in our community in York and North Yorkshire. We can rewrite this story, evidence-led, action-driven. We can change the future of female enterprises, and more importantly, female business leaders are saying we need to change that narrative and we need to change it now. So those are the kind of compelling reasons. This is not research for research's sake. This is saying, how do we make that impactful and measurable difference? Because it's just good business sense.
Yes, it is, isn't it? I mean, and those figures are really quite eye-opening, aren't they? I know when the research came out and they were first published, it was, wow. I mean, that's not small fry. 165,000 jobs, £2.6 billion could be added to our region if female founders were supported. So you mentioned a couple of challenges there. What other challenges were coming out of the report that women are facing in this region that are stopping us from untapping that potential?
So let me focus on a couple, and 3 in particular, in terms of what stood out most. And I want to tackle this issue of confidence because it comes up time and time and time again. So questions of confidence and self-worth are often seen as soft issues, but this research doesn't show them as soft issues. They're actually associated with structural barriers. So confidence and self-worth are often the disguise for the structural barriers that women are facing, that lived experience. So it's not a lack of support. There's huge amounts of support out there. Is it visible? Is it the right kind of support? And in some cases, it's actually the wrong kind of support. So we invest all of that money, but it doesn't deliver the measurable outcomes that we want. And again, let me just, put that into context. Just 7 female-led businesses in our region import products or services. That's how deep the gap runs. And you have to kind of take a step back and pause with that. So women are still facing closed doors when it comes to funding that fits their growth ambition. So again, it's not the lack of funding, it's the right kind of funding. And I also want to tackle this question, which was really prevalent in the research, from start-up to scale-up. Micro businesses are the lifeblood of regional, city and place, and yet they're undervalued. And so we need to kind of reframe what good business looks like, not through the kind of measures that we've always assessed high growth, but new measures that look at the contribution of micro businesses. And I think those are really important findings because they're based on the evidence, they're based on the data. This isn't soft issue of, women lack confidence, so let's put them on a confidence course. I think we've been there, done that and got that t-shirt, and that's not what they're asking for. They're asking for us to really take seriously about how do they import, how do they export, how do we get the right finance. I call it the 3 M's, money, management and markets. How do we do that in an integrated way that really does tackle the structural and systemic barriers?
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with all of that completely. And absolutely looking at those systemic barriers. And why do you think it is so important? I mean, you've touched on it a bit there, but why is it so important to have all of those barriers removed for female entrepreneurs in this region and for the playing field to be level?
So I think we do have to tackle this. We have to tackle it personally and we have to tackle it structurally because it's smart economics. It just makes good business sense. So this is not asking, for a handout or special support. But let me just be serious for a moment about this, because what it really does, at the heart of this is about how do we power our region and the enterprises in our region? Because if we want the seeds to new startups and scale-ups, but it also matters at a human level, building women's confidence, dismantling the invisible ceilings and ensuring talent isn't wasted simply because the system wasn't built with women in mind. And so I guess my aspiration and ambition is that in years to come, we're not talking about women's enterprise or social enterprise or male enterprise. We are just talking about smart economics, smart enterprise and responsible enterprise for all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful and so true. That wouldn't it be incredible if we just had a world where it was just smart enterprise for everyone and we weren't talking about these barriers anymore. So to bring my next guest into the conversation at that point, I have Katie Reeves here, who is an incredible, she's our female entrepreneur here today, and she's from Festive Green and some consultancy. And she really is the living example of somebody who has taken that leap of faith. I'm sure if you're listening, you might have had a great idea at some point and not sure what to do with it or where to go with it. Well, she did exactly that, and she's taken that nugget of an idea and she's creating a fantastic, sustainable product that's going to transform the way that we do Christmas. She also has a thriving consultancy practice. She's a marine scientist. She worked some time in Qatar, She tells me tagging hawksbill turtles and whale sharks, which sounds absolutely amazing, only a few years ago. And both of these aspects have taken a great deal of courage, overcoming her own self-doubt and challenging beliefs, and also experience in a very male-dominated industry as well. So welcome, Katie. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Can you remember that pivotal moment when you decided that you were going to go for it and you were going to do something with your idea for Festive Green?
For Festive Green, it was definitely when I had to register the company, so it would make it real. So I had the idea for a while, but it's that fear and that hesitancy to actually just put it on Companies House and to make it real, which meant that I had to then do something about it. And I was dithering and I was hesitant, but it really was a fear. It was just a fear, and I felt physically uncomfortable. But a very wise person told me that what was the worst that could happen? Like, will the sky fall in? No, nobody would really know. It would just shut down after 2 years if you don't do anything about it. So it's just taking that first pivotal step, like you said, to actually just register it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love that. Or what's the worst that can happen? Because sometimes we do build things up in our mind, don't we? That, it's going to be some awful outcome when actually you were just registering it with Companies House. No, that's really good. So you must have done lots of different new things and done things that perhaps you didn't think you could do. One of those, registering your business. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? We talked about imposter syndrome, and how did that show up for you?
So I've had it lots, and I still have it. I don't think you'd almost be, I don't know, a person if you don't have imposter syndrome. But how it shows up for me is a lack of action. So I overthink things. So with Festive Green, I've never produced a product before. And so I was like, well, I have to find a product designer. But would a product designer think that I'm a bit of an idiot? Am I silly? Am I daft? Why am I doing this? They'll just laugh at me. I don't even know what I'm asking for. How do you ask what that? And at the time I hadn't got into ChatGPT. So, but that's where it comes from, and then the thing that happens is that I have a lack of confidence, and then I don't actually take action. So that's what happens to me in my imposter syndrome, most definitely. But for some reason I find it far worse in my existing career. So I came back, so my kind of world had shifted a bit. So I felt a lack of confidence moving back from the Middle East, because there I knew all of the environment being the physical, ecological environment, because that's me as a marine scientist and advise on that and the impacts. So when I come back to the UK, even though I had 15, 16 careers here, years here, coming back, I felt less confident again. I felt like, what am I doing here? There are lots of young, bright-eyed people, and so I feel it quite a lot. And then again, it causes inaction, so you don't feel confident.
So, sorry.
But I think you raised such an important point, because that was in a really important but special thread all the way through. And I want to say something about imposter syndrome, both from the research, which you have just brought to life in such a thoughtful and reflective way, because every founder has moments of doubt. That's not gendered, in relation to that. And I think for me, imposter syndrome is about questioning, and you've articulated that, do we belong? And we're kind of second guessing the pitches, holding back from those kind of bold moves. And yet, look at the experience and the knowledge. I mean, each imposter syndrome, whether you're an entrepreneur, an academic, a researcher, whatever you do, that's kind of something inherent in us. But actually, I think that's a good thing. Let me explain why. Because I was thinking, it's in those moments of fear, it's in those moments of doubt, it's in those moments of anxiety, and it's in those moments of failure that the research shows some of our best enterprises have grown and flourished, because there isn't a complacency. And all the research says that every entrepreneur that's been successful has had to deal with failure. And I think we could learn so much about changing the discourse on imposter syndrome, which is not that it's a deficit, but actually it's a really important way and thinking about and reflecting on the way that we do things. Because Because if you step through some of the fears, which you've just articulated how you've actually done that, which I think is really powerful, and we lean into some of the networks that we've just been talking about, and we reframe confidence as an opportunity rather than this thing that kind of holds us back. Because that's how we grow. We grow as individuals, we grow our businesses. And so I was really struck, and I was surprised, if I'm being honest, that confidence was, one of the very prevalent themes, from the research. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But I really agree with you in terms of reframing the conversation around imposter syndrome, because often when we feel that imposter, actually that's a sign that we're just doing something new. It's like getting out of breath when you're cycling up a hill. It's a natural consequence of doing something you're unfamiliar with, because we don't have any reference point and our brain is going, hold on. And so I think it's very important to rewrite that conversation, because you're absolutely right. As soon as we walk through it, we see the fear, but we don't listen to it, and we just keep walking, we then start to build new experiences and new knowledge, and we realise the sky isn't going to fall in, that we're perfectly safe, and we can actually go ahead and start developing some incredible products such as yours.
And maybe business support, also needs to deal with the politics of disappointment, that we are going to have moments, not just of doubt, but moments of failure.
Yeah.
And it builds resilience. Moments of failure means you're more resilient in the future.
Well, how often have our biggest learnings come from when actually things haven't gone the way we expected to go? But usually something comes out of it that we think, oh, actually, I'm really glad that didn't happen in that way, because I've now learned X, Y, and Z. So again, failure can be a good thing, and we don't need to write it in this way. Now, you mentioned that you worked back there in Qatar, Katie, and that it sounds like that was quite a tough industry as well, and male dominated. Has that shaped your experience of confidence, and how you've shown up in either of your businesses now?
Yes, so I distinctly remember being in an emergency response room, as it was a corporate energy and environment, and raising queries. So how it's really tough, and the imposter syndrome comes out by somebody. I gave feedback, or it was a criticism, or even a positive reflection of what had just happened, and then the person who was facilitating the session kind of dismissed it and put it aside, and I thought it was actually a really good reflection. And then what happened was, literally a close friend of mine said the same thing, but in a different way, and they were all like, oh yes, that's a great point. And I was sitting there going, that's why it was a tough male dominated industry, because they tended not to listen to you as much, and so therefore your confidence doesn't help. But because of my background and being very almost, if you cut me through, you can see seaweed in the middle. So being so in love with the blue planet that that gave me more confidence to say things, because I knew about the environment. So when I'm advising on things, that gave me a strong sense of, I know I'm right about this, and therefore to tackle them in that way. But there were certainly times when, and I just remembered another time when I was offshore on a rig, and the way that the men dealt with me, saying, oh God, look at like other rigs, like the fire coming off or whatever, and the black smoke. And I'm like, I'm not talking about them, we're talking about us. But there's no way that they would have challenged a man in that way, and an auditor that was offshore. So that's how it made me tough, but it makes you more resilient in those times to try and deal with them in different ways. And how does that show up now is that you take that through, and it just makes you more resilient to get back up and to keep going. And that's how it's helped me anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. There were also in the research, it suggested, Kiran and Katie, that confidence or a lack of confidence can lead to undercharging or not valuing what you do in the right way. Is that something that you've experienced, Katie? And maybe the research, Kiran, what are your experiences on that?
Definitely. My first, so when I came back and set up the consultancy, my first contract I won, I said what my rate was for the day rate, and they laughed at me and they were like, "Oh no, that's wrong. We don't do that." And so I went for the lower rate. And then the worst thing is they redid the contract, but they sent me somebody else's contract, so I knew, and they said, "Oh, nobody gets that," which was worse, is because then the contract that came through was on a higher rate. So I said, "No, I'm sorry." So you just go back and negotiate it. But I absolutely, and I just felt like, oh no, I questioned the rate that I was charging, and so again, you just go, "Oh no, they must be right," and it wasn't until that they made a mistake later that I realised that. So
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, that was very coming through strongly in the research, but we also have to kind of understand what does the data tell us behind that sort of approach. And what the data told us, that was 79% of women have the ambition to charge the right amount, to grow and scale up their businesses. But 31% said that they did not have the access or the knowledge or the experience to where to go to get a deeper understanding. So it's the knowledge gap, it's not the skills gap. It's where do I go? How do I know what the right kind of pricing, sort of will be? Because they don't know where that kind of business support is available. And so that's the kind of, sort of key. Because not only does it hinder the startup, it then hinders the ability to scale up if they so chose, to kind of want to do that. So having access and knowing where to go for that kind of, sort of, whether it's mentorship, whether it's support, is really, really important. Yet it's so simple.
Yeah.
I mean, that intervention, we could all plug tomorrow.
Yeah.
yeah.
And be more honest and more transparent about what pricing is and what our charging is, etc. We don't want to talk about money. We don't want to talk about, what we're charging. We fear our competitors. Money's not something we want to talk about. And actually, we need to have an open conversation about it so that women know what the charging levels are or what is expected. Otherwise, all we're doing is fighting in the dark, aren't we?
Absolutely. And again, the stats speak for themselves, because, in the research that we did, it wasn't just quantitative. We did lots of kind of qualitative work to be able to kind of back that up. And I found it really interesting when, 68% of the women in this research think that financial management and the planning and the development of that business is needed for successful enterprises, and yet only 36% of them said they felt they had that skill.
Yeah. It is something that we could plug very, very quickly. Something like that. Yeah.
Agree.
So just moving on to how we can move this forward a little bit. What advice would you give somebody starting out and who might be struggling with confidence or not knowing what to do about pricing or charging?
Find your supporters and cheerleaders, and that, I know that's tough, but to get out there initially and in networks, and to try and go find somebody who's done something similar, but that's going to cheer you on. But I've been so surprised by how kind and how many people will give their time for free to have a chat, for a coffee, or even just online, and so you'll find supporters and people. I was super lucky to have a lovely coach and find a really good mentor as well, but all of us struggle still, obviously, with if you're struggling with the self-confidence day to day as an entrepreneur, and it's really lonely. I do a bit of self-care now and go for a walk and refix my brain and just tell my pea brain, not today, Clarice, I don't want to hear from you. So I'm like, no, I don't want to hear about that. Just keep going and know that you can do it. But definitely to have those supporters to go, I'm having a really bad day, and just know that that's normal, and that everything is not like it is on LinkedIn, and everything's not all sunshine and roses, that you go through really tough times. And you still do, as an entrepreneur, you will do. So I've had one storming year and I've had a bit of a blip in the summer. So it's about refocusing, starting again, and saying what are your next actions.
Thank you.
And for me, I think, what we've articulated in the report based on, the evidence was 7 key things. And I think that's really important, that we take a systematic and organised and collective approach to the way that we deal with it. We've been talking about struggling with confidence, but there's 6 others that I think we really need to kind of talk through. And one is the difficult pathways to self-employment. So even when you have a great idea and you want it to evolve and you want it to develop, we've got to think about the policy implications. How do we embed new forms of policy learning and different forms of business support in relation to that is designed with those female entrepreneurs? So I call it with them, by them, and critical by design. So it's not others saying, we think this will be good for you. It's them from the ground up. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then I think there is one that we really do have to address and nail, because we have been talking about it for years, and that's understanding and access to finance. Now, that is not because women don't have the financial knowledge or the experience. In fact, all the research says they manage finance far better in terms of the way they invest in their business. But what they need is the access and the importance of the kind of information that we've just been articulating and discussing. And then there is the one about, we've talked about pricing, but we also need to kind of understand about how we invest in customer and the acquisitions in relation to that, the retention and the pricing of that. Because the price that you start off with today may not be the price that you'll be working with in 18 months, 2 years' time, as you develop, as you grow. So those are the things that they don't stay static. And then this one, which has come up time and time and time again, and I think we can do something really innovative and creative in this space, and that's about the quality and availability of various forms of local infrastructure. So rather than it's all individually confusing the market by offering all of this great support, which they don't even know exists, and when it does exist, they don't know, well, do I go to the University of York? Do I go to the business support agencies in terms of, the city council? Do I go to all of the kinds of mentorships? Or do I go to all the various banks that we kind of work with? So we need to work as a collective whole that says, here's where the expertise lies in all of these different areas, but we work together and, and present that in a much more unified sort of form. And then there's this thing about quality and availability of mentorships. Time and time and time again, women will say, I want a high quality mentor that's been there and that's done it, who will understand, not give me all of the answers. So I think we have, an obligation to build a strong mentorship base in relation to that, and a sustainable one. And then finally, it's about managing the business administration. The research says they juggle just about everything and anything, and that's a real skill set. So how do we support that in really understanding what does it mean to manage your own, kind of business in relation to that? And so there are 7 recommendations in that report, and all of the things that we've been working really hard on, that we'll be kind of talking about sort of kind of next month, and about how we galvanise the financial sector, the banks, the universities, the business support agencies, the mentors into a collective force and a collective whole. One voice, critical by design, and a new era for female enterprise.
That sounds an incredible future, doesn't it? If we could achieve that. Is there anything that you would like to add to that, Katie, about how you would like to see, if I had a magic wand and I waved it, what would you like to see as a female entrepreneur in this region?
It would always be about the funding, but it's the way that funding is presented. I mean, the funding that I've been able to access has been the ones with less forms. So I was very lucky to get some money for some consulting for my website, but that was a smaller form. And then the other things have been through pitching, which I much prefer. So you do a video or you do something that's a bit different, so that accessing funding streams just might be a bit different. So you don't have to put a form out that's 20 to 80 pages long. Yes, you have to do the checks and balances, I understand that, but I just feel that something needs to be, and that's maybe the entrepreneurial talk of a new way or an innovative way of doing this kind of access to funding. I feel would be better that way rather than doing it the way that it is, which is more like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Vogons. So that's how I see it anyway, definitely at the moment. But yeah, it's just the other thing that is the access to all the courses and everything. And I was just a bit like a terrier trying to find them all from the Growth Hub and the North Yorkshire and the Connect Over a Cuppa, and I did access a lot. But you tend to do these courses and then you're left to implement it on your own. So you're kind of feeling a bit adrift. So while there's lots of different courses and it's all there, you're still left, and then you don't have accountability, but neither do they. They've done the course, there's your check. Have you done your feedback form? Yes, thank you very much. So that's how I've seen it in the last couple of years, is that there doesn't seem to be something after that. And I don't know what that might look like, but that's the support that's missing. So whether it's an accountability partner, or if, I don't know, co-working spaces seem to do quite well with that. I visited one yesterday in Skipton, which is fab, run by 2 female entrepreneurs. That's really lovely. So, but it's because then they sit at a shared coffee space and say, have you done your website? Oh no, I better go and get on with that. So yeah, I don't know how it looks, but that's how that's the magic wand I'd like to see.
Yeah. And how about you, Kiran?
Yeah, I think you've articulated it so well there. I think it's really important. It's not saying, let's start again. It's a whole new chapter. So there's 3 things that I would say. One is how do we change the metrics? And I think that's a really important one, because that will influence the kind of business support systems and structure that we have. And we often talk, and it's a common term that's used all the time, end-to-end support. But what I'd like us to do is to lose the language of end-to-end support and articulate what that means at the various stages. So you're absolutely right. We don't say, here's all the knowledge that you need. Thanks very much, good luck, and I hope it all works out. That we have phases. And so we had those 3 phases of support. And it's those women that then go on to be the future mentors of the next set and the next set. So it's kind of, we're building that sort of cycle. So let's think about the metrics. Let's think about the critical by design, idea and concept. And I guess, the other one, which, you've raised so powerfully and so articulately, is the power of stories. Because we have to convert those stories. And I don't just mean success stories. I also mean the stories where actually it just all went kind of wrong and what we learned from that, and make them more visible. And they're not just good stories. It's about showcasing, in York and North Yorkshire, as well as the UK more widely, the stories of female enterprises and entrepreneurs and what makes those successful, because that's the evidence that will then, support the new forms of kind of business support that you've just been articulating. So let's just lay all the foundations. We've got to grow those foundations into those kind of, phases, and think about, the support that is kind of ongoing.
And one of the best things about seeing these these ladies yesterday, their success is about building a community. It's not about their economic strength of their business. They run it as an additional business to what they do anyway, and so they know that it's not going to scale or grow, but that's because their objective and their success in their story is about having a really lovely community. And so that's what it's about. So the success does not mean the bottom line and that you're scaling to 2 million within 3 years. That's not what success means.
It is changing the language, isn't it, and the rhetoric of what good responsible businesses look like. But then that also has a knock-on effect, because again, if you look at the stats of the kind of equity and angel investment that goes into female businesses, the stats are sobering. It's a big sharp wake-up call. So how do we get more female investment and female funders working with us in relation, to future investment in terms of new startups and scales ups.
Do you think there is a disconnect there, though, Kiran, when you hear a story like Katie is saying about the co-working space there, where the metric, the KPI, if you like, isn't pounds and pence. It is about the impact that it's had on the community, and then what the measurement that a funder or an investor would look at. And perhaps there are more female businesses out there that are doing business differently, but the reason they are doing business differently means that actually then they're not as attractive to funders. Do you think that might be an issue?
So again, let me play the facts back and the data and why that needs to change. So in York and North Yorkshire, only 62k of equity was raised by female-led organisations compared to, wait for it, 3.8 million.
That's gobsmacked.
Gosh,
And
that
1.8 million by those led by a mix of genders. And I think that change is here. And so I don't think it will be a barrier in the future, because actually what's happening, in the economic climate is people want good business. They want responsible businesses, and community, and building that collaborative community, that collectiveness is going to be really key. And so I think there is a business opportunity for different kind of founders, different kind of angel investors. And we're already beginning to see some of the seeds of that, and people kind of taking some ownership and control of that. So I'm not saying only women will invest in women-only businesses. That is not the model that we ought to be advocating. It is that, what's the vision, what's our end goal? And it's to make enterprise everybody's business.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you both of you for joining me today. The conversation has been fascinating, and I'm sure everyone who's listening will have enjoyed it as well. And I think what's come out very clearly today is that this is why stories matter and why research matters, so that it can make the invisible more visible, and so that we can have these conversations and share the challenges that we face, but also how we're overcoming them as well, so that it helps other women, other female founders. So I hope, if you've been listening to this today, that something has resonated with you. We'd love to hear from you. Share your experience, your reflections, even your questions, because the chances are that somebody will relate to that too. And who knows, your story might even find its way on a future episode of this podcast, and you may be sitting where Katie and Kiran are sitting today. But before we wrap up, I'd like to think about how you could maybe support a Women in Business. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be a shout out or a referral, or signpost some business support to help build that community and shared knowledge and experience, because it is an opportunity for us to build a supportive community, as we've been discussing today, where business is everybody's business. So thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to be back with you next time for our next episode of Breaking Barriers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.